Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Andrea Tooley. I'm an ophthalmologist in Rochester, Minnesota, and I treat patients with thyroid eye disease, or TED.
And I'm Beatriz, also known as B, and I'm a passionate advocate and a patient with thyroid eye disease and Graves' disease, diagnosed 5 years ago.
Welcome to the first episode of TED Today, a special daily show we created for the first ever TED Awareness Week. In each episode, you'll find important information for patients living with or people caring for those with thyroid eye disease, also known as Graves' eye disease or Graves' ophthalmopathy. But if you have Graves' disease, it's also important to listen up because up to half of people with Graves' disease will develop thyroid eye disease.
As someone who lives with thyroid eye disease, I personally understand the challenges and the importance of education and of finding community. That is why we created this program, to bring you information straight from the experts and from others who are living with thyroid eye disease. Este programa es totalmente en inglés, pero si necesita recursos en español, por favor visite la página que se indica en esta pantalla y ahí encontrará recursos que le puede ayudar.
Over the next 10 minutes, you'll hear from an excellent lineup of guests with important information. We'll have a Q&A about thyroid eye disease with Dr. Mark Brown, an ophthalmologist specializing in oculoplastic surgery in Mobile, Alabama. Then we'll have Straight from the Source, what it's like to live with thyroid eye disease and tips for finding community with Kanani. And finally, myth busting, common misconceptions about thyroid eye disease.
And that's just today. During the rest of this week, we'll be bringing you a variety of topics that will be very helpful to you.
So, without further ado, let's turn it over to our first guest. Here to talk to us today is Dr. Mark Brown, a specialist in thyroid eye disease and ophthalmologist.
Thank you for having me.
First question, for those who are watching who don't know, what is thyroid eye disease?
So thyroid eye disease is a kind of a rare autoimmune disorder that typically affects the eye and the orbit, and it enlarges the muscles and the fat around the orbit and often causes problems with vision and with appearance. So it's something that's often progressive, and we want to try to make a diagnosis early.
The next question is, who's at risk for developing thyroid eye disease?
Thyroid eye disease is definitely more common or most common among patients who have hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease. In fact, almost 50% of patients with hyperthyroidism actually will develop thyroid eye disease symptoms. But it's really important to understand that there are other categories. Patients with Hashimoto's or even patients who are hypothyroidism can also develop thyroid eye symptoms. Women are more likely to develop thyroid eye disease than men, but when men get it, their symptoms are much worse and more aggressive. And I would be remiss if I didn't say something about smoking. Smoking increases the risk for hyperthyroidism and also makes the symptoms worse for thyroid eye disease.
This is a question I get a lot. If someone's had their thyroid removed surgically or if they've had other thyroid treatment, are they still at risk for developing thyroid eye disease?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's probably one of the most frustrating things among patients is the answer is yes. Even after someone has had their thyroid removed surgically or chemically, they're still at risk for thyroid eye disease. And that leads to a lot of confusion, but basically thyroid eye disease is a separate condition than hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease, and it needs to be diagnosed and treated separately.
And what are the most common signs and symptoms of TED?
So thyroid eye disease can present in any number of ways. Patients, I think, most commonly present to us complaining of kind of a scratchy or foreign body sensation or grittiness in their eye, and that may be due to dryness on the surface of the eye. It also may be due to inflammation on the front of the eye. Sometimes these patients have eyelid retraction, and sometimes they have bulging of their eye forward, and often they have double vision.
Final question, what should you do if you start to notice symptoms developing of thyroid eye disease?
So if you have a thyroid abnormality, especially if you're hyperthyroidist, if you're a Graves' disease patient, but also, again, if you're hypothyroid or Hashimoto's patient, and you have symptoms of dryness or irritation or double vision, you really want to seek out a specialist, and a specialist relates to thyroid eye disease. That would be an oculoplastic surgeon or an eye plastic surgeon, sometimes a neuro-ophthalmologist. I think a lot of times patients may not convey the right keywords to help the physician make the diagnosis, so it's important not to withhold or edit the symptoms that you're experiencing so that the provider that you're going to can help you make the diagnosis. You need to be fully candid. You need to explain the symptoms that you're having in terms of your vision and appearance and your quality of life and how it affects you, so that they have all of the information available, because it sometimes can be a difficult diagnosis to make, and if you withhold any of that information, it can lead to a delay in the diagnosis.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Now we're going to learn about thyroid eye disease from the source. Here to join us is my dear friend Kanani. Hi, Kanani.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me on.
Can you take us through some of your background and experience with thyroid eye disease, as well as how you have come to build community?
Sure. I've had thyroid eye disease for the better part of 5 or 6 years. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And being a busy person like most people, I just powered on, because really I thought that the dark circles under my eyes and the really dry skin and the itchy, scratchy eyes were just part of getting old. So I just went ahead until one day during my yearly physical, I actually was diagnosed with Graves' disease. And from there, everything snowballed. I went to several different endocrinologists, and the third one actually looked at me and sent me right to an oculoplastic surgeon. And that's when I was diagnosed.
Can you tell us what it looks and feels like to have thyroid eye disease? Can you explain that to our viewers?
So I think the first things that a lot of people will notice is a slight change in appearance. And that might be either really puffy eyes, or in my case, they were very dark circles that weren't going away with any number of creams and potions that I bought. The next thing is, and it comes on gradually, is usually a sensitivity to light. All of a sudden, you're not wearing sunglasses because you're a movie star. You're wearing them because you just can't tolerate bright lights, either inside or outside of the house. Another thing that happened to me was driving at night became a horror show because all of a sudden I didn't have depth perception that I needed to navigate the freeways. Doing things like reading or watching television becomes very hard because it's just exhausting. Your eyes are working overtime. So the impact of the disease is profound, and I don't think it can be understated at all. It really is very serious.
Can you talk about how you built community so that you have access to the resources and experiences of other people with the disease?
Well, community is actually very large when it comes to handling a rare disease. And that's everything from finding the right physicians who are going to take you through the course of treatment that you need, to your family members and people who are going to help you during those days when you can't quite do the things that you used to do anymore. It might be finding someone in human resources who understands that what you have is a disability and allows you to make the changes in your workplace. But the biggest thing is finding people who have been down the same track you have. And so online forums can be very, very important in that journey. You know, I think you just have to be willing to let people help you and building your community that way. So whether you do it online or whether you do it in your neighborhood or with your own family, everyone has to get on board, because one thing about thyroid eye disease is that while you're going through it, it feels like forever, but once you're on the other side and you're getting better, it's not forever.
Well, Kanani, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Bea. Thank you for asking.
Some of you watching may be very familiar and very knowledgeable with thyroid eye disease, and some of you might be quite new to this condition. But either way, I think that you'll be surprised about some of these common misconceptions. I'm going to read some statements, and then you decide whether they're true or false. Ready? Here we go. Okay, number 1. Thyroid eye disease is a symptom of Graves' disease. This is false. So while thyroid eye disease can occur in up to 50% of patients who have Graves' disease, it's a completely separate disease and requires its own treatment and monitoring. Number 2, people who have had their thyroid removed or treated in some other way cannot get thyroid eye disease. This is false. Thyroid eye disease can still occur in patients even if they've had their thyroid removed or treated in some other way. So it's very important to continue to have monitoring and appropriate care even if you've had your thyroid removed or treated. Number 3, thyroid eye disease can be vision threatening. This is true. While thyroid eye disease is a rare disease, it can cause blindness in some cases. So it's extremely important to see your thyroid eye disease specialist and have a baseline exam. Number 4, thyroid eye disease affects only women. This is false. While thyroid eye disease affects women 5 times more likely than men, men can still develop thyroid eye disease, and often their symptoms can be more severe. Number 5, thyroid eye disease runs in the family. This is true. Thyroid eye disease can run in the family, and if your family member develops thyroid eye disease, you may be at greater risk of developing it as well.
Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this first episode of TED Today. Tune in tomorrow as we dive more deeply into the physical and emotional challenges of thyroid eye disease with a special day in the life episode. But before we go, let's hear from Amy Magro, the Senior Director of Patient Advocacy at Horizon Therapeutics, in commemoration of the first ever TED Awareness Week.
Hi, my name is Amy Magro, and I'm on the patient advocacy team at Horizon Therapeutics. At Horizon, I have the opportunity to provide education and support to the TED community through working with patient advocacy organizations and with TED patients and their care partners. My favorite part of my job at Horizon is the opportunity to work with TED patients and their families. I've learned so much, not only about the disease, but also just how to live your best life every day through the support of the community. All of us at Horizon are so excited to launch the first ever Thyroid Eye Disease Awareness Week. We know it can feel lonely living with thyroid eye disease, but you are not alone. We hope that by raising awareness on thyroid eye disease, people will better recognize the symptoms, know how to find a TED specialist, and feel empowered to get the support they need. Visit the Listen to Your Eyes Facebook page again tomorrow for the next episode of TED Today. We hope you enjoy it.